Hey everybody, this is Josh McKinney, and I just want to welcome you to episode 39 of the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu Show. Now today, I have a really cool guest for you guys today. His name is Kenny Florian. If you guys follow UFC, if you guys follow mixed martial arts, you probably already know who Kenny Florian is. He really stepped into the spotlight in the first season of The Ultimate Fighter, where he was a finalist. He ended up fighting for the title 3 different times in the UFC. And then after retiring, he made a really big impact on being an analyst. And not just for the UFC, but actually for BattleBots too. So if you guys don't know what BattleBots are, you should freaking check those out, because that was like being the host of BattleBots was my 10-year-old dream. So it was really cool. We didn't really get into BattleBots. I should have asked him about that. Kicking myself now. But anyway, he's a really cool guy. And I think what you guys will be really pleasantly surprised about is this is not an interview where I say, Kenny, what was growing up like? What was, having this many brothers and sisters like? What was being on The Ultimate Fighter like? I didn't really want to ask him that stuff because there's a lot of podcasts out there that already have. If you guys wanted to check those out, if that's what you're wanting is backstory of Kenny Florian, this is probably not the episode for you. But if you are wanting to hear about his opinions, his thoughts on jiu-jitsu, and we do talk UFC, of course, and mixed martial arts, but his opinions on jiu-jitsu, which I promise you are really, really good. They are really solid opinions on jiu-jitsu. That to the extent that right afterwards of recording this, I was so excited because it wasn't just a MMA interview, which I was not sure. I think people would have enjoyed, but when somebody is so proficient at something like jiu-jitsu, like Kenny Florian is, and an ambassador for it, he has so much more reach than Josh McKinney, right? And he is, I feel like, doing the right thing for the art. And we get into that, and I really, really, really loved it. But before we get started, if you guys are, obviously right now we're going through a pandemic. Most of us are still not able to train. So maybe you're looking for something to learn. Maybe you're looking for some way to progress. I recently did an instructional with BJJ Fanatics, and it is called the Knee Cut Roadmap. And if you guys would check that out, I would absolutely love that. Right now, as of recording this, BJJ Fanatics is doing their Together 2020 deal, which is 30% off. And so you would get 30% off my instructional, the Knee Cut Roadmap. And honestly, it is really good instruction. I think you guys will really like it. But more importantly, it is the most entertaining and instructional that you will ever see, guaranteed. I know you guys know that I have a fun, weird sense of humor, and I let it shine through on the instructional. So without further ado, here is the interview with Kenny Kenflo Florian. Kenny, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you for being on. How is everything going for you right now during the pandemic?
It's been a little crazy. I think, we're doing the best that we can. I have a gym in Boston, Florian Martial Arts Center with my brother Keith. And I own another gym in Los Angeles with my buddy Jason Hunt called Meraki Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And we're on the west side of Los Angeles. And I think we were like the first, no, I guess the second academy in like the country or something like that to shut down. So we did it before the fourth shutdown. And, we figured that it probably wasn't a good thing to be doing jiu-jitsu right now with what was going on. And we shut down, even though we knew it was going to kind of hurt us. So we've been trying to stay afloat, man. We've been delivering Zoom classes to our students, and at least trying to get them to at least do some kind of exercises or drills, or at least get them a chance to see some different techniques that they could save. We send them the techniques and stuff like that so they can have it in their files and kind of reference it moving forward. And, we're hoping to kind of put this all behind us so we can all kind of get back to doing what we love to do.
For sure, man. Running a jiu-jitsu podcast during the pandemic makes me feel like I am running a capitalism podcast in a communist country. It's odd, man. It's really an odd feeling. Do you feel like that those Zoom classes, do you feel like they're helpful to your students?
I definitely think it's the best alternative that we could think of right now. It's difficult. Obviously, we are in a martial art and a sport where you need someone else to be able to do that martial art, right?
Yeah.
That's what makes jiu-jitsu so effective, but also what makes it so challenging during this time. I think we're doing our best to deliver the best content we possibly can. I think at the very least, for a lot of the students, I think it gets them to look at jiu-jitsu in a different way. They have to use their mind a lot more. It's interesting, I'll give, an example for myself. I think that during this time, I guess let me rewind a little bit. I've been putting together notes for an instructional for later this year that I want to film, that I feel is going to, help people understand jiu-jitsu a lot more, no matter what kind of rank you're at. So I've been really putting together this instructional, and I've also been kind of developing an idea for a book in regards to this as well. And during this quarantine time, I've never made kind of more progress than I have before. I think it's forced me to kind of look at jiu-jitsu in a different way, and I kind of have to think about jiu-jitsu in my own head as opposed to kind of being in the regular setting, going over things with people. And I've been doing a little bit of that with my instructor when I do that at Meraki, going over some of those concepts. But I think when you're forced to get out of your regular schedule and get out of your familiar environment, you're forced to look at things in a different way. And I think that's always a good thing. I see jiu-jitsu with a different perspective now. I think I've been more creative almost in a way because I haven't been training as much. So I think anytime you can refresh your mind and refresh your eyes to look at something in a more pure way, I think that you're able to be more creative. You're able to really look at the truth of things, similar to how meditation is supposed to work. Not to get too deep, but I think you have to make the positives out of this crazy situation, and I definitely have been trying to do my best at that, and I think I've been reaping some rewards from it.
Yes, that makes sense. So I've actually heard you say that in different podcasts, referencing the instructional that you plan on coming out with, that you feel like a large majority of the people that do jiu-jitsu don't really understand jiu-jitsu. Could you give some type of what you mean context for that?
Sure. I've identified, a few things, and different instructors have talked about these things, but I don't think anyone has really combined everything together to illustrate what exactly is going on, not only in jiu-jitsu, but in all of grappling. There is no difference between judo, wrestling, and jiu-jitsu. The rules are different, but the mechanics of what's going on as far as, how we utilize leverage, what we're trying to achieve as far as getting underneath someone to sweep them or take them down. Basically what I've done is I've identified basically 5 major things, and there's only 5 things that are going on in jiu-jitsu at any point. And I've tried to really kind of utilize the science of it, the physics of it, and identify those things for people. So there is no mystery. A lot of times we look at some of the best guys in the world, and we say, well, they're just doing some crazy technique, or they're doing this or doing that. All the techniques are working within the functions of physical properties. And I wanted to define that for people to kind of unleash the mystery of what's really going on. And I want to give them a conceptual understanding of grappling in general. And so that, I think it's going to change the way that people perceive jiu-jitsu. I think it's going to change the way that people teach jiu-jitsu in the future. I mean, that's my hope anyway. And I love jujitsu with everything that I have. It has changed me inside and out. I feel like there is this transformative process that happens when you get beat up and you're able to do things with the principles of jiu-jitsu. I think you become more humble, you become more confident, it raises your self-esteem. You don't have to be a jerk about certain things, about being insecure. And I think that I really want it to have an impact, not only on people's, the way that they perform on the mat or in competition, but also the way that they carry on in their everyday life.
Man, I'll buy it. I'm in. I like that. I like that idea. I think that it's so important for us to remember, because a lot of times people, they want to just roll. They don't want to think about the conceptual properties of jiu-jitsu.
Yes.
And the reason that we do that, and I always give this example to my students, the blue belts now at the gym would kill me when I was a blue belt, 10 years ago, because there is such a new level of teaching. There's such a new level of explanation. There's so much more information out there. When you just roll and get better by only rolling and not understanding jiu-jitsu, you do get better eventually, but it's not at the same speed. It's not at the same level.
I couldn't agree with you more with everything you said, in regards to not only, the level of the blue belts now, but here's the thing, as I think you can know a lot about a subject, but also not understand the subject. I think I knew, and a lot of black belts, they know a lot of techniques, but I don't know if they understand techniques. And I feel like I've been really working hard, especially over the last, I guess, year and a half, of really trying to compile everything that I know that is true about jiu-jitsu. Now, you still have to train. I'm giving you, the ideas of what you're doing. And my goal also is to basically allow the practitioner to self-diagnose what is going on. That if you can understand what's going on, you don't need to memorize all these techniques. You could say, okay, this is what's happening. This is how they're controlling me. And this is how I can unwind it. Yes. So then it becomes, you can then inject your own jujitsu into the equation. Now, we do that already with different techniques, and we find a little, this grip does this or this grip does that. But we need to go deeper. We need to really, figure out the true principles of what's going on in jiu-jitsu, identify that, and come from that place. And I think from there, we can enjoy the process a lot more, instead of just thinking that like jiu-jitsu is this magic, or I need to attain all these different kinds of techniques in order to be better. And I think that's a way more difficult way of like memorizing each technique for each scenario. I think we need to be feeling way more the position of what's going on. And if we understand what's going on, we're not going to be frozen by trying to remember what we need to do in a certain moment. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. It's a way of problem solving, because that's what we're doing in jiu-jitsu all the time. Is we are trying to present problems to our opponent and solve the problems that they present to us.
Absolutely.
That is. Would you have a working title for this?
I've been I've been trying to think of it a little bit. Basically, it's without revealing it, it basically it's this theory that I've come up with, and I'm not exactly sure of how I want to present it as of right now. It's basically my theory on jiu-jitsu and what is identifying the 5 principles of what is actually going on in every, not in some situations, but literally in every single situation, whether you're mounted, whether it's defensive, offensive, stalling positions, what you actually need to do in every single position. I identify the most important aspects of jiu-jitsu and the true aspects of jiu-jitsu. It allows people to, I think, to be more creative and to go deeper with their practice.
That is awesome. Who are you filming it through? Are you filming it? Are you going to do it yourself?
I have a guy who is from Canada who originally was a photographer, then went into putting together different documentaries, and he's like really like an artist. And I kind of took a shot in the dark and said, you do some amazing stuff. I said, would you ever want to do an instructional? He's like, I've never done anything like that. He's like, but that seems pretty easy compared to what I do. And I said, yeah, let's do it. So we were supposed to start in May. Obviously, I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen, with the travel restrictions. Obviously, he's in Canada and stuff. But, I'm hoping that sometime this summer that we can start filming and put it together. But he's been in the martial arts community a little bit. He's trained jiu-jitsu and stuff like that. But he's never done any, kind of instruction. So, there's been other offers that I've had with different companies and stuff. But I kind of wanted to just do it myself and see what happens.
That's really cool, man. That makes sense to me. Okay. So, I wanted to start out, obviously we started out there, but, kind of wanted to go just and talk a little more about, your academy in, is it in Long Beach? Is that where you're?
It's in Los Angeles. Actually, it's on the west side of Los Angeles. We are, on the Brentwood Santa Monica line.
All right, awesome. And so you bring in, how do you know Jason Hunt? What was your?
So basically, we used to train, I used to live over on like the east side of Los Angeles, not the east side, but like in Hollywood. We met at Sean Williams' gym, 5-star martial arts. And, we met there, trained, and kind of hit it off. And Jason comes from a, similar background. He was a former soccer player and, was into judo. He's a black belt in judo as well. And, came up from the ACTO system, but also, trained at Gracie Baja for a long time, trained with Homolo Bahal and all that stuff. So for a long time as a student of Homolo's. And so, we kind of hit it off, and, he had brought up the idea about wanting to open up a gym, and I had a lot of things going on at the time. So that was kind of delayed a little bit. And then the timing kind of eventually was right to open something up on the west side of Los Angeles. And we felt like they didn't really have, a large kind of nice aesthetic look to an academy out there. And we wanted to do something a little bit different and bring kind of a little bit more of an artsy, nicer feel to the jiu-jitsu community in Los Angeles.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. So what was the thought process on bringing on Isaac Dordelin?
Dordelin. Isaac is a guy who was teaching over on the west side. He was teaching in Culver City at the time, which was about 20 minutes from us. And that academy was shut down. I had spoken to Isaac when we were first opening up, and I actually wanted to hire him to help us with our teaching duties. I have a lot of respect for Isaac and what he's accomplished as a competitor and as a jiu-jitsu practitioner, and felt that he would be a great fit to help teach over at Meraki. It didn't work out. Eventually, we hired someone else, but when, a little bit later on in the process, when those guys were kind of shutting down, I reached out to Isaac again and, wanted to see if he was interested in coming over. And it just kind of worked out. It was perfect timing. And Isaac's been a great asset to the gym, having the ability to train with someone as high level as Isaac, and, our students have access to him and what he's doing is tremendous. It's inspirational too, to see, how well he's been doing over the last year or so. I expect him, whenever the IBJJF to get going again, I expect him to be a world champion, for sure, in his weight class.
That's awesome, man. So you opened up. Did you have an underlying goal with opening up this gym?
Yeah, for sure. I think we wanted to bring something really different. I think we were really inspired, to be candid, of what AOJ did in Costa Mesa. And we said, if there's one place if there's a place that we can create that's similar to that, obviously put our own spin on it, that could thrive in another city, it would be Los Angeles. There was nothing like that. And we wanted to bring a really cool aesthetic and kind of bring back the spirit of martial arts too. If you go to Meraki, it looks cool and it looks slick, but also it looks like a traditional kind of Japanese training hall as well. It's this kind of It's almost like a spiritual martial arts vibe when you go in there. It's very simple and minimalist, but it really achieves kind of what we wanted to bring. And when I came up in the martial arts, I started with Kung Fu and Kempo karate. And I remember as a kid looking at the walls, and they had a dragon and a tiger and, the crane and all these animals that were up on the wall. And I remember as a kid, like, getting it immediately, like, oh, okay, like a crane, they're swift and graceful and they're balanced. A tiger, like, they're aggressive and they're powerful and they attack, like those immediate images came to me whenever I thought of a certain technique. And we have, similar images, very different, but we have these large pictures of various animals and stuff, like very artistically done by some of our favorite photographers that we're friends with in Los Angeles. And we put those up and framed them. And we felt like those were powerful images to kind of give to our students as they're training. And, it was one of the things that inspired me. So I kind of wanted to bring that back. And Jason as well has like such a keen eye. So we really wanted to bring our own kind of take on an artistic vibe and make it a welcoming place. As like, just walking through the door is one of the most intimidating things for people. Like, to sign up to a jiu-jitsu gym is intimidating for a lot of people. It's scary. I want to sign up and pay you money to have you choke me out. Okay, sure. Not a lot of people are going to sign up. So we wanted to make it an inviting space. As soon as you walk in, you're like, whoa, this is a jiu-jitsu academy. This is different. So that we wanted to get people at least in the door and get them to understand we're doing something else besides just trying to beat people up. Like, there is an art form involved in what we do.
That's so true. And that's just on the business side of running an academy. It's really disheartening to see a lot of people's websites. And basically the website is this, like, hey, you're going to be tough, but don't forget the coach of this gym is so much tougher than you. And
right.
Man, it's like, it's so uncomfortable because, like, I still, a lot of times I always like to look at places if I'm visiting, if I'm traveling somewhere and I don't know anybody that owns a school there. So I'm like, oh, I'll look around. And so I'll look at a few websites and I'll be like, well, I guess I'm just not going to train this week.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, just kind of touching on that, what is, and I always love to kind of bring this up for the people listening, because at blue, later in blue and then at purple belt, a lot of people kind of, if they think they want to run their own academy, that's when they start to think about it. But what, in owning an academy, obviously this is your second one, what were you surprised at, if anything?
As far as opening the academy?
Yes, just in running the academy, I guess I would say.
Running the academy. I guess just all the bureaucracy, I guess, just all like kind of the red tape that you need to go through in the city of Los Angeles to get an academy going. It's a lot, man. Like in Boston, it's pretty straightforward. Obviously, you get your business license, you open up, and you're good. In Los Angeles, it's a little bit different in that you need to get all these things done and all these permits and blah, 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 blah. So I think both Jason and I were kind of just surprised, blown away, and frustrated, certainly at times, with all the things you need to do to just open up a jiu-jitsu academy. Like, you hope that, we're in this country, it's a great country, the United States, you can open up business and like this free, spirit where you can, get these businesses going, especially businesses that are going to help the community and they're going to get things going. But when you go into a city and they make it so difficult for you to do that, you're like, oh, man, come on, I just want to get this going. I'm not trying to do anything evil here. I'm just like trying to open up academy and get students in here and get them learning what we believe is super important for them. So I think that kind of threw us off for a little bit. There was a lot we had to go through with the city in order to get everything going. So.
Man, so it's funny. In the second place that I opened up, I he was one of my purple belts at the time. He's a brown belt now, but I live in the Midwest. Okay. And there's a lot less red tape where I live. Right. But he's in a very rural area, and we were going to open this academy. And so we're going to get our business license. We go to City Hall and we say, hey, we're here to apply for a business license. And the
Right.
lady goes, what? And I said, a business license. And she's like, well, we don't really do that. And I was like, well,
Wow.
what do you mean? Like, what? So we just can open up? And she's like, yeah. And she goes, well, you know what? She goes, it would be smart. And she literally takes out a piece of paper, like a blank sheet of paper, and puts it on the desk. She goes, you should write your number down and the address, just in case the police ever get an alarm there, so they know who to call. And I was like,
Wow.
okay, I'm in. And so it was crazy to see the contrast from like a big city to, a small town. They're just like, dude, any business, as long as it's legal, just come in.
Right.
Just help us out.
See, Josh, that's the way it should be. I feel like that's the way it should be. And I get it. This is a much bigger city and they want to keep track on all those things. But I think sometimes when you're trying to become too organized and have your thumb on everything, it becomes too complicated, and it's discouraging to business owners and entrepreneurs who are trying to get something going. So I don't know, that was a little frustrating, but we're moving past that now.
Yes. Good.
Yeah.
So as you're teaching, are you teaching a lot of the classes?
Yes. That's kind of one of the more common questions I get all the time is like, hey, so are you there? Are you teaching? I am there every single day. I love teaching. It's probably my favorite that I do. And with our business, it's the least amount of money that I make. I have other things going on and things, but that's my favorite thing to do. So for me, it's not about the money. I truly love what I do right now. It's a little bit, tough right now because, of what's going on, but I truly enjoy it. I really do. And both Jason and I just feel really grateful that we get a chance to share our art, and we all teach differently. Jason has a different take on jiu-jitsu. I have a different take on jiu-jitsu. Isaac has a different take on jiu-jitsu. And I think that's also important for students to understand that there are different takes, and there isn't necessarily one view that is the best necessarily. And I feel like, it's really important to share the different philosophies on jiu-jitsu because everybody is different. I think, that's kind of one of the problems, I think, with our education system in some ways is we want to have this cookie cutter approach. Like Josh is the same as Rick, who's the same as John, is the same as Sarah, and they all going to learn exactly the same. And if they can't, sorry, that's not the way it should be. I think, everyone thinks differently, moves differently, has different body types, has different schedules. And I think, the more that you can give them different perspectives, the students will kind of align themselves on their own with kind of resonates with them.
Dude, that is so important to understand, is that people learn differently. And when you understand how you learn, you can also kind of fast track your progression in jiu-jitsu. For example, I never have been somebody that has been able to learn from show me move instructionals. My dad, who's also a black belt, he just literally watches hours and hours of instruction. I can learn a little more from watching competition, but I learn the most when I'm actually on the mat and I'm saying, well, how does this feel? How does this feel?
Right.
And so it's weird. You just, different
I'm
people.
the same way.
Yeah.
I'm the same way. Yeah. That's cool.
And obviously people like us are better than everybody else.
Of course. Obviously, ours is the right way.
Yeah. And I know we claimed, we claimed that there are other ways. Yeah, there are other ways, but there's only one right way.
Okay. Yeah. Ours is the right way. Yeah, obviously.
So you have been in jiu-jitsu for how long?
Man, I think going on 24 years now.
Man, and you've gotten to see, you've been training jiu-jitsu almost as long as I've been alive, but wow. You have gotten to see just so many changes in the art, right? So many changes in how people learn and how people compete and what they're competing in. Is there anything that is changing that you don't necessarily agree with or that you wish wasn't happening?
Oh man, great question. First
I
of all,
always have one. So
thank you. Thank you for making me feel old. Number one. Number two, no, I think that there are some things. Listen, I think that as far as jiu-jitsu in general, this is my main problem. I think just because we're changing and advancing things in certain ways doesn't mean that we're going in the best direction. So what do I mean by that? It's almost like sometimes, you'll see car manufacturers that end up adding all these technological features, and you're like, oh man, this is going to be great. I have all these other features. I can do all these other things with this car. Can't wait to buy this car. And you go in there and the function of it is so complicated that you're like, I don't even know how this works. Like I'm driving, I can't reach for that button over there, or like do this function or do this. Like this doesn't make sense. It'd be much easier if they had it laid out like this, and this. So sometimes we do that with our jiu-jitsu where we add more steps. And I think right now we're in this kind of age where like the leg lock thing, which I love. I love leg locks. It's great. But sometimes I see these videos where, let's say someone promotes a leg lock video, or let's say some other move, a sweep. And you'll see like a 30-piece move to get this sweep that could have taken them 4 moves. And it's just kind of like, man, that's too complicated. It does not make sense. Just because you're doing moves that may or may not work doesn't mean that, because you're adding in all these other movements that it's more complex or more advanced or better. I think we should be looking for more straightforward approaches. Like, what's the quickest path to that? And are we addressing all the other things with as little things as possible? So a lot of times, like, let's say, we don't take into account all the other ways that someone can counter. That takes training. It takes research. You got to like look at what other people are doing. And we start adding in all these other movements. Okay, so I'm going to address this, and this, where maybe your position could account for 5 of those things straight off the bat, instead of trying to address a grip for each kind of counter that someone's going to do. I don't know if that makes sense, but I feel like we're overcomplicating jiu-jitsu so much.
Man, that makes perfect sense to me. I want to say it was Albert Einstein, but nobody ever fact checks you on quotes anyway. So I'll just say it was
Yeah.
Albert Einstein. He was saying that a genius can simplify things to people, take things that are really complex and simplify them. And for whatever reason, jiu-jitsu, so many coaches, I think it's like maybe it's ego of like wanting to seem like they know so much that you need to try to attain. I need to get to that level where I know so much. But the problem with that is you end up overcomplicating, you make it hard, and you even make it discouraging for your students. For example, somebody who is not for example, but somebody who is excellent at not doing this, and you mentioned him earlier in the podcast, is Sean Williams. Mm-hmm. I got to do some I think I've gone to a few of his seminars, and his explanations on jiu-jitsu were very simple, but his way of simplifying how to train literally changed my jiu-jitsu. And it was amazing to just see, like, he just had a really simple example on how you should be training. And I was like, oh, that's it?
Yeah, I think it's super important. Sean comes from such a great lineage, and he's a smart guy who's been around for a long time, and he has a tremendous amount of experience. And I think, over time, I think when you're younger, sometimes you get caught up in thinking like, oh, I got to do all these moves. I got to learn all these moves, all this. And as you get older and you start to understand the art a little bit more, you start to simplify things, and you get from A to B in a much faster manner, I think.
That makes sense. So do you, if you're looking at that, what do you think that we as jiu-jitsu coaches, and then the people listening as, coaches and athletes, could do better to simplify things?
I think that, understanding the art, really looking at what makes it work. Okay. So what are the answers to the answers? Right. So, okay. If I grab this collar and I knee cut in this manner, I get it. That should get me the pass. But what is making it work? Just because I have the grip? Is it my weight distribution? Am I utilizing a wedge here? What is a wedge? What are we doing when we're guard passing? Okay, I'm grabbing here, I'm doing this, but what is the guard pass? No one asks these questions like, what do you actually need to do to get a guard pass? What do you actually need to do to retain guard? What are you trying to do? What does your body need to do to escape side control? You know, not, oh, I need to move here, move here, move here. Oh, if they grab this, I need to move here, move here, there. No, what are we actually trying to achieve with each and every position, offensively and defensively? And I think that's a different question than here's some answers. My goal, and to get back to instructional without like, trying to make this a promo here.
Promo it as much as you want. I'm pumped about it. I'm ready to buy.
I'm trying to avoid that. But, I guess my goal is trying to give, and again, I hope that I can achieve this, but I'm not trying to give answers to each question. I'm trying to give answers to all the questions.
That makes, man, that was, can you say that one more time? Last thing, just last thing.
So, I'm not trying to give an answer to each and every question. I'm trying to give an answer to all the questions that basically they're always the same answers to all the questions. The thing is, what are those answers? What are those things? And I think that way we can kind of make jiu-jitsu less confusing, less scary, less panicky, and I think that's the other problem, to get back to your other question, which was a great one. I think we're making it so much about certain physical skills. You look at some of the best competitors and they're awesome athletes and they should be, but sometimes we see a lot of techniques like that are kind of like people are kind of gooning their way through like certain moves, like turning the Incredible Hulk to get by certain guards, or like coming up from like a spazzing movement in order to get a sweep or whatever. And sometimes we think that's what jiu-jitsu is about. Like, oh, if you can just move like Incredible Hulk guy, that you can make jiu-jitsu work. That's also discouraging. When again, if it worked or if it didn't work, we need to figure out what actually is going on to make that technique work. Not like, oh, because this person is spazzing through a guard pass or spazzing through a sweep or, exploding off of an escape, that's the only way to do it. We have to be very careful with how we define our jiu-jitsu. Are we doing jiu-jitsu, or are we utilizing a lot of physical characteristics to make it work? And I think if you have good jiu-jitsu, the good jiu-jitsu will always nullify good physical characteristics.
Man, I think that's super important to note on. It seems like, I think it's like people set goals in jiu-jitsu, and I'm a huge proponent of doing that, but they're very small goals compared to what most of our underlying goal of jiu-jitsu is. And most of the time, people may not even realize it, but most of the time our underlying goal is just to be able to train forever, right?
Right.
Just to train as you grow old. And as you were saying, there's so many things, especially at the high levels of black belt, which is what people watch a lot, that will not work even when you're 40, probably.
Right. Right.
And it's tough for a lot of guys to understand that, even though, like for me as a black belt adult, even though I'm trying to get to a world championship, right? That's what I'm focused on, and that's what I want. I shouldn't ruin my body or my jiu-jitsu for that, because it'll destroy the goal.
100%. I think you're very accurate on that. And isn't that what we're supposed to be learning after all? That's what jiu-jitsu, that's the basis of jiu-jitsu. That's the basis of martial arts, is that there is skill involved. You look at a guy like a Gordon Ryan, and he obviously works very hard physically to become as strong as possible. But when you look at his jiu-jitsu, he looks like he's moving effortlessly. Mm-hmm. Even against huge guys like a Marcus Buchecha, a 13-time world champion, it looks like he's just so much more efficient than every single person out there. He's just, it's not that he's physically better than everybody, he can utilize that if he needs to. And that's always going to support him and keep his body strong and healthy. But it's his knowledge and his execution of his technique that is separating himself from everybody else. Do not get that twisted. You know, you look at the other guys who are tremendous athletes like the Lucas Barbosas or the Marcus Buchechas and all those guys. They're amazing athletes and they're physically very impressive. So what's the difference? I believe it is the knowledge and the execution of the skill. And I think that's what separates Gordon Ryan in the no-gi realm from everybody else. You know, Mikey Musumeci, you know, is he this physical specimen? Yes, he's super flexible and all those things, and that helps him. But clearly, on a technical level, on knowledge-wise, he's doing something that's just different than everybody else. And I think we always get caught up, and it's hard because, you know, just the nature of how we take things in, right? We have these eyes and we see something and we get so fascinated with movement. You know, that's typically what we tune into. But in the reality, the good stuff is always the invisible. It's always the stuff you can't see. I think that's what we should be learning, what we should be putting our focus on to learn is what's the invisible that's going on? What's the weight distribution? What's their base like? That's the stuff that really makes things work, not this crazy fast movement necessarily.
And I think you referenced it. The perfect example of this would be Gordon fighting Buchecha at ADCC when he had that, I forget what they call it, some type of Japanese name for it, but the arm wrench position.
Yeah, they call it the sumigaeshi, but basically he was in a butterfly guard position with the arm pinch, with the shoulder pinch, and then when it made it look effortless. You know, and that was just beautiful to watch.
And you're right, it was invisible though, because most people don't realize that for Buchecha to defend properly in that position, he has to drive his arm deep. To drive his arm deep, his hips have to come up. His hips come up. That's when that butterfly sweep. Underneath. Yeah, that was when that butterfly sweep was available. And it's, again, that what you see on the highlight is the actual sweep. What you don't see, or a lot of times, what people don't put a lot of, you know, understanding is that position is just a beautiful position. It's just a position that your best escape. I trained with Jonathan Satava one time when I was a purple belt, and he's
very good with the butterfly guard. Yeah.
He's so good in that, and he had me in that arm wrench. And you know, one of your best options for it is to either just accept that you're going to get swept when you get caught there, or you try to drop your elbow. And he was just so proficient at keeping my arm tight. When I tried to drop my elbow, he arm locked me. And
absolutely. And you look at Marcus Buchecha, like, you know, is Gordon bigger, stronger, faster than Marcus Buchecha? Definitely not. So that's a perfect example of, like, you know, it's his technique that was superior in that position that allowed him to get that sweep against a 13-time world champion legend like Buchecha.
That is so true. So just to kind of go into this, because I thought it might be fun to talk about, because I know you've gotten to train with so many different people. Without saying anything negative about anyone else, is there anyone that you look at that stands out as a jiu-jitsu technician that you've gotten to train with?
You know, the guy who has had the biggest influence on me has been Ryan Hall. He's a brilliant individual, the most impressive martial artist that I've ever trained with, and one of the smartest people that I've ever met, period. He hit me up, I think back in 2014, to see if I would help him with some mixed martial arts stuff. And I said, sure. I said, here's the deal. You got to help me with my jiu-jitsu. I was coming back from a back injury, and I hadn't trained for like 2 years. So it was off and on. I would train like once, and then I'd be out for like months. Like my back was just not healthy. And I took this as an opportunity. Once I really heard Ryan talk about jiu-jitsu and his approach, I was like, man, this is a different level of understanding. And I took this as an opportunity to, like, really try to learn jiu-jitsu from scratch, like forget everything that I knew. And now how can I take this approach and really learn what I thought was like the most efficient way of approaching the game, the most technical way. And it's helped me so much, like just even like to put together what I've put together. So much of it came from Ryan and his understanding of what, he was trying to tell me and how he moves. And, he is, for me, one of the finest expressions of jiu-jitsu in the world. You never feel him tense up at all. Like, it's always the structure of his body. You either feel like a ton of bricks and it's not him tensing, it's just how he positions his body, or you feel him like trying to hold on to water. It's beautiful. He can be a ton of bricks, or he can be just like this invisible force that you don't even know where he is. And I think that was just, mind-blowing to me. So he's always been the guy that has impressed me and inspired me the most over the last 6 years or so. But I've trained with some other, awesome practitioners like Craig Jones. I think is another guy that is extremely technical, really knowledgeable, really smart, really good when it comes to strategy and approach. And Isaac, of course, Isaac Doderlin is really impressive. And, for a guy who's in that weight class, he could put so much pressure on you. He's extremely fast. He's very precise when he gets to his positions. And martial artist through and through. So those are a few of the guys that have really impressed me.
Could you explain what, I guess the difference between, especially in jiu-jitsu, someone who is a martial artist and someone who is an athlete? Obviously they can cross, but I think just personally, it seems like because there are, such superior athletes, there are such, around the world, there are such amazing rooms to train in, it almost allows people to just be an athlete and be really good at jiu-jitsu. What do you feel like is the difference?
That's a great question. Even in the UFC, I feel like there's a ton of fighters, but there's very few martial artists. And I'll define it like this. I'll do my best. I think there's athletes, there's fighters, and there's martial artists. Sometimes you get a combination of both, right? But I say the fighter is out there to basically put violence on somebody. They're out there because they love to fight. They want to scrap. It seems like they got something to prove. And they're out there because they want to hit someone. Like they just love it. Win or lose, they're out there to throw down. Whether it's them getting hit or they're hitting, doesn't matter. They're out to like punch people and beat people up and entertain, hey, that was a great fight, blah, blah, blah. Like, look at me. The athlete is out there. Their number one concern is winning. So they're out there to be number one on the podium. The martial artist is out there to have the best skills possible. Now, a lot of those martial artists end up on the number one spot on the podium as well. But it's a deeper way of looking, I think, at your practice. So the athlete, their only concern is being number one on the podium. Now, that can mean going out there and trying to win by advantage every single match. That might mean, doing whatever it is possible to get the win, because that's their main focus. The martial artist is out there to hone their skills to the best possible level. So they're trying to attain something even higher than the number one podium. So they would be, let's say, they might be okay with losing, let's say, in the quarterfinals, but they submitted everyone up into that point and they lost by advantage, for example. And they might have lost to that athlete who won by advantage all the way through. So I think the martial artist is looking to really attain a skill level that is above everybody else. And not even everybody else, they're just trying to take their skills as far as they possibly can. And I think that's super important. And I think it's a different approach than saying, I just want to get a gold medal. Hopefully you follow that, but
yes, that makes sense to me, man. That makes perfect sense to me. Do you have anyone, we kind of named them in jiu-jitsu, but as let's say in the UFC, do you have anyone who you consider a martial artist, somebody who would be the guy there?
Sure. I would say Israel Adesanya is a martial artist. I think that he also is looking for ways to win without getting hurt as well. Like some guy, like you'll see there is the let's say a guy like a Donald Cerrone, I would say is probably a fighter, right? Donald Cerrone, Mike Platinum Perry is a fighter. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's their approach. That's awesome. And people love them for that reason.
Of course.
But I would say Israel Adesanya stands out to me as a martial artist. He's a champion, of course, but he's a guy that, he goes out there with a very specific strategy. He's not out there to just try to get hurt or put on a show for the fans. He injects a certain personality into his martial art. There's a very also distinct style with a lot of martial artists. You'll see them, they move differently. They think differently. They're just doing things on a different scale than everybody else. So, to me, I think he embodies, the ideals of a martial artist more than others. He talks some trash too, I think. That's kind of the business side of things. Typically, you don't see martial artists do that. But as far as his execution inside the octagon, I would definitely classify him as a martial artist.
Man, I think that's probably a great example. And as much as people may not want to hear it, but the last fight was probably a great example of being a martial artist right there. Was you have two counter strikers and they said, no, I'm not going to, especially Izzy, because when people are booing, they're booing the champ in that situation.
Yes.
They expect you to just go out and fight. They expect you to be a fighter in those situations. And he didn't. He did a really good job of saying, I'm going to play what I know.
Absolutely. And Anderson Silva, was criticized early on. People forget this, but Anderson Silva was criticized in some of his matches, back in the day, he's being boring when he fought Patrick Cote or, even in the beginning, before he knocked out Vitor Belfort, for the first 3 minutes, they kind of circled each other, what seemed like forever. And I remember I was in the crowd that day. People were booing, but then a kick came out of nowhere. Martial artist Anderson Silva, found his hole and knocked out Vitor Belfort in an instant. I think Damian Maia is a great example of a martial artist. He's out there to win with jiu-jitsu. He's out there to display his art. And I think that's kind of the difference.
Yeah, and not to make this too much about MMA. You've had an MMA fighter too, right? You fought MMA once, right?
Once or twice.
Yeah, okay. So, but yeah, not to make this too much about MMA, but it's kind of an odd thing in MMA how people it's like when you go to your uncle's funeral and he was like a jerk and everybody gets up there and they're like, oh yeah, I loved him. He was the best. People do that in MMA. People hated GSP. They just despised him because he was a phenomenal wrestler. And then you get now and everyone's like, oh yeah, GSP's the GOAT. He was my favorite fighter of all the time.
No, he wasn't. You booed him.
Exactly. You hated him. And so it's really interesting to get that, to see that in MMA is like, and I don't know if it's just people wanting to just talk, but it's almost like they respect the martial artist a lot more afterwards.
Okay. Well, I think we're getting to a really interesting conversation because I think, and I'm not trying to crap on anybody or whatever, but I think commentary has a lot to do with that. That's how we influence. The martial artists, the guys that have been in the game for a long time, we can understand and see a lot of things that other people don't, right? We're doing jiu-jitsu. We're not out there why didn't he do a rear naked choke? You're like, dude, he was mounted on it. There is no choke there. What are you talking about? The regular dude, they don't know. But martial artists, we know the position they need to be and all that. But I think we approach commentary for martial arts and mixed martial arts the wrong way. Typically, you see the NFL guy, right? When we watch NFL, we're talking about, dude, look at how big and explosive he is. He does a 4-1 40-yard dash. Benches 225 50 times in under a minute. You're like, those are the things that we kind of reference because we're so used to biggest sports being about these physical characteristics. Well, jiu-jitsu, martial arts, yes, there's some impressive individuals out there who have some very good physical traits. But why are we always talking about how explosive they are and how fast they are and all this? Like, there's no technique involved. Like, what are the techniques that are taking place? What is going on so we can communicate those things to the fans so they understand it's not about being powerful and going out there and brawling, bro. Like, there's a lot more going on, and I think for the fans, I think it's that much more important for us to really explain that invisible stuff that we're kind of talking about. Why can't he do that in a certain position? Is exploding the only way to get out of mount or out of the back? You'll hear certain things like that where the real story isn't really being transmitted to the fans. So now we think it is about brawling and being exciting and bleeding and all these things that we can only see with our eyes and not really understand with our heads.
Dude, that makes sense. So basically, for example, and this is because I've watched UFC since I was a little kid.
Yeah.
When I think of Kenny Florian, in my mind, Kenny Florian has sharp elbows. That's what comes to my mind, right?
Right,
and,
exactly.
Yeah, and it's like there is like you were born with these razor blade elbows that you could just go out and just
can't
cut.
Train it, dude. You can't train them.
You
it's
can't.
The only way. These elbows.
Exactly. And so and so then I'm thinking at 8 years old, like, oh man, I wonder what Kenny did. What could I do to sharpen my elbows? You know what I mean? Like it's very
exactly, dude. You nailed it. Like, again, how does that make it attainable or understandable, for the regular fan? Like, I don't know, very few people can, do what Mike Perry does. Very few people can go out there and fight every month like Donald Cerrone. Like, you can't even wrap your head around that, and that is what people think the sport is all about. Like, if there's no blood in a fight, it was not a good fight. If they didn't stand right in front of each other and beat the living piss out of each other, that was not a good fight in a lot of fans' minds. And I think it's what makes Floyd Mayweather so impressive and why he had to do a lot of trash talk is because you look at him, the reality is he's not the most exciting fighter, right? But good luck hitting that dude. Like, he will stand right in front of you like an old kung fu master and just avoid everything that you can do. Why aren't we talking about that defensive superiority? Why aren't we talking about that master level of boxing where he can go right in front of you and you're just not going to hit him? He hits you 6 times, you hit him 0 times, as opposed to going out there and I hit you 33 times and you hit me 31 times, and now we have this great fight. But does that make me a great boxer? Like Luke. That's what makes Lucas Lepridge so impressive. Is he goes out there and he will shut you down. You do nothing, and he passes your guard and he mounts you and he wins, 7-0. But you'll see other guys like the great matches, like, oh man, like that was an awesome match. It was 12-10. Whoa, how many mistakes were made in that fight? Mm-hmm. So we have to be conscious of those kind of things. I'm always impressed with a guy that can go out there, shut a dude down, you do nothing, and he does whatever the heck he wants. That I think is a special level of martial arts skill, which I think we should all be trying to attain.
Of course, and I mean a perfect example too is Mikey Musumeshi's
yes.
I was going to say his last worlds, but really his 3-year run that nobody has done anything to him. His understanding of positions and just knowing where he's at and how to win each little battle it's unbelievable, especially when you think about who he's fighting.
And it's only going to get better from here on out, right? I mean, he's still so young. He's really just getting started. And now he's gaining that much more confidence where he's going to start – you're going to see him really run away from people now, in my opinion. I think he's going to start to just, blow everyone else away.
Yeah, man. I think that you are right about that. I think it's tough. I don't.
Good luck catching up with him. Yeah.
Exactly. And it seems like a lot of times though, whatever sport, especially, I guess probably just whatever sport we're talking about, you see these people and eventually there comes another Mikey Musumeci, another,
Yes.
just somebody that, and of course, that studied everything that is Mikey and really understands and, maybe has those physical attributes after Mikey's start to age a little bit.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And even now too, it's like you were talking about, back in the day where we didn't have a lot of access to information like YouTube. When I started, you were lucky if you got a VHS tape, you know what I mean? Like, oh, I got my VHS tape and now I'm going to watch it. And it takes you like 3 hours to get through the whole thing. You got to rewind and then fast forward and, slow. You can't even slow the damn thing down. Now, we have such access to information. You can go on YouTube, you can go on Flow Grappling, you can go on all these different, sites to look at the information. So now if I am, a brown belt and I'm winning everything coming up and I'm in Mikey Musumeci's weight class, guess what? I've just been watching him for 7 years and I know the ins and outs, maybe not, of his game. So I can start to figure out as I go through. So by the time I get my black belt, I know what Mikey Musumeci, or I know a lot of what Mikey Musumeci is all about. Back in the day, you were lucky if you went to a tournament and saw what someone has to offer. So now we can research opponents, we can break things down. How many people are out there on YouTube trying to break things down? Some are okay, some are better, but I never had that growing up. So the game is evolving. And that's what also makes someone a martial artist, is when they understand that there is no end to the process, that we are all making each other better by doing what we're doing. We all are getting information going, aha, now I know how to stop that, or now I got to figure out something for that, or I got to, deal with this or deal with that. So it's just, ideally it should only get better,
Man, that makes really good sense to me. That is, we are kind of at the end. I wanted to dig a little deeper, but we are at the end. There's always a question that I like to finish with, though. Okay. So the show is the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show. So the scenario is this. Okay. I am a blue belt and I am at one of your seminars. Okay.
Yes.
And you are doing a question and answer, and I raise my hand and I say, Kenny, how do I suck less at jiu-jitsu?
It's something that Bruce Lee said, and I'll steal it from Bruce Lee. Don't think, feel. And it's like what you were saying. You have to feel the position. Feel what's going on, especially in regards to the weight of your opponent. Where is your opponent? And that's what's going to tell you what to do. And I would also say this. Don't compare yourself to others. This is your journey and your journey alone. Use that both to get better and also to surpass everybody else. It's not about your ego. It's about how much you can learn on a single day. So don't think about your failures just for the sake of thinking that you failed. That is information. Your losses are information. Your wins are information. Think about what you need to do to get better every single day. Don't think about who you need to beat or who is beating you.
That is a good answer, man. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Absolutely, man. Thanks so much, Josh.
And that is the episode. I held it together through the interview the best I could, but I literally got to live my 10-year-old dream, maybe 12-year-old dream. I don't know when the first season of The Ultimate Fighter came out, by getting to interview this guy. That was such a cool thing for me, because for my brother and I, when we were growing up, when we saw season 1 of The Ultimate Fighter, that's when we really got into the UFC. My dad would always order pay-per-views and we would have people over, but it was never really that big of a deal for us. It was never really that significant until The Ultimate Fighter. When they got in that house and there was drama with it, we were hooked, right? And to get to have a podcast and to get to sit down for an hour plus with Kenny Florian, the guy that I watched on The Ultimate Fighter, was so cool. That was such a different experience than I expected to ever have. And it was a lot of fun. And I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. Hope you guys progress from it some. I hope you guys check out Kenny's instructional when it comes out, whenever that may be. Hope you guys check out my instructional, which is already out now, the knee cut roadmap, available on bjjfanatics.com. But most importantly, I hope that you guys suck just a little bit less at jiu-jitsu.